A showdown on the plains awaits this weekend. The Auburn Tigers and Arkansas Razorbacks, what feels like truly a must-win for both sides, especially as we think about the ascension of the program on the plains under Hugh Freeze. Helping us break it all down, Taylor Korn of The Next Round Live. She also hosts her own podcast, the Uncorked podcast, which you can find on YouTube. I was actually checking it out just before we went live. Taylor does great work with, again, The Next Round. They do a great job covering all things Auburn, Alabama, the entire SEC. Taylor, appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. This has turned out, like we were talking about right before we started, to be a bigger game than I think most expected. So it should be a fun weekend down in Auburn.
Yeah, Taylor, on that note, and of course, we're going to be there. Can't wait to get to the plains, to Jordan-Hare Stadium, which you and I were joking off air. You really there's times you get humbled in life, and I feel like I got humbled as a college football fan when obviously I didn't grow up around Auburn or as an Auburn fan, but I feel like that's just something I should have known. So you never know when you're going to get humbled, but it's Jordan-Hare, not Jordan-Hare. I want all the Auburn folks watching to know that within the last week I have learned the correct pronunciation. But no, this is a game, to your point, Taylor. I mean, over the summer, I picked Arkansas to win this game in an upset. Since then, obviously, week of game, I am picking the Auburn Tigers. But Auburn folks were stunned. They balked at it. Now, all of a sudden, we come in the week of the game, Auburn just a 3-point favorite. So I think, obviously, the outlook of this one has changed a lot. And some of that due to what we've seen on the field, which, Taylor's where I want to start with you. What have you seen from this Auburn team through 3 weeks? I mean, again, you've played two inferior opponents. Auburn has crushed both. The game against Cal, what's so interesting, Taylor, about that game is going into the week of that game, I was talking to Auburn people, and, the joke was sort of, is Auburn going to cover, right? Like, nobody in their right mind thought Auburn could lose that game to Cal. Sure enough, we all saw what happened, the 21-14 loss. We've had a quarterback change, obviously. So, I mean, these first 3 weeks, Taylor, what's jumped out to you most? What surprised you? Has anything been as you expected? And it's been a pretty drama-filled first 3 weeks in the Plains, it seems, for Auburn.
It has, and the biggest question this offseason, as most of SEC football fans know, was the quarterback. It was, can Peyton Thorne look – how much better can Peyton Thorne look when you're bringing in the weapons around him? Because, that was kind of the narrative that was being spun since the end of last season. The horrible, horrible bowl game was – once he has better receivers, Peyton Thorne will look better. Week one, how much stock can you really put in that game? Because it was Alabama A&M. He looked like, he could run an efficient offense against that level of an opponent. Week two, I still get nauseous over it. But my biggest takeaway going into the season, I was just trusting. I was buying into the hype. I was buying into the Peyton Thorne's going to look better. And I wasn't expecting a quarterback change to come this soon. If it was going to come, I would have said, okay, later in the season. But in my mind, this is the perfect time because Hank Brown got a game under his belt against a team that Auburn should have and, did beat. And now he kind of progressively starts to see better talent on the other side of the field. And because my biggest concern was if Peyton Thorne's going to struggle, we can't just throw Hank to the wolves in Athens, week 6, the sixth game of the season, if Peyton starts to struggle. So I think the timing of this works in Hank's benefit because he kind of gets to slowly progress. And by the time, he's on the road playing Georgia, he's got a few games under his belt. Again, like I said with Peyton week 1, how much stock can you put in his performance last weekend? Because the defense, I don't know what they're ranked, but I'm pretty sure it's near the bottom of the FBS teams. But he looked like he could make things happen on the offensive side of the ball. And Peyton, throwing the ball was not Peyton's strength. And that's what Hank Brown, he's known as a gunslinger. And maybe the weapons that were brought in will be more beneficial to Hank Brown than they were for Peyton, because Peyton, that just might not be his thing at the end of the day.
You mentioned the weapons, Taylor. I want to go there. I know Cam Coleman was held out of that New Mexico game, obviously, for precautionary reasons. It sounds like, obviously, he's going to be good to go. Have the weapons in your mind lived up to the hype, if you will? I mean, obviously, I think they're going to look a lot better if they get better quarterback play, but, it does seem as if there's been a lot of highlights from guys like Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, Keandre Lambert-Smith. How impressed have you been with the new additions when it comes to the weapons on the offensive side, outside of the quarterback, obviously?
I think the addition of Keandre Lambert-Smith, who transferred from Penn State this offseason, for those who might not know, was massive because we are so reliant on so many young guys. And it's hard. The transition from high school to SEC football is a big one. And you don't know until you start playing games how well those younger guys are going to transition. And so Auburn's offense, the running backs, we have a lot of returning production in the running back room, but the wide receiver room is so, so young. So I think Keandre Lambert-Smith coming in has helped. And there was a lot of talk during the offseason about, him putting in extra time with the younger guys, helping them progress as fast as they could. But I think Cam Coleman going through spring in Auburn definitely helped because Hugh Freeze has said, Perry Thompson obviously is a freak athlete, but he got there a little bit later. So everyone progresses on a different timeline. I've been extremely impressed, up to this point, watching them play against the level of defense that they have. I feel like they've done their job. Obviously, we've seen a game less of Cam, but Malcolm Simmons is another name, which you've probably been hearing it a lot this past week, but he's an electric player. Every time he touches the ball, something crazy is happening. And Hugh Freeze got asked about it. I can't remember if it was in the Monday press conference or post game. Why isn't Malcolm Simmons on the field more? And it was the same thing that he said about Perry and some of the other younger guys. He's having, I don't want to say a hard time, but it's taking him a little bit to learn the playbook, which is understandable. But he said, I think now it might be time to where we have a package. I might just have a box on my play sheet that literally says Malcolm. And he has enough talent to be on the field, so we need to take advantage of that. And I think that a lot of fans will be excited about that. So overall, I've been very impressed. I think Keandre Lambert-Smith, he's had a big play in all 3 games leading up to this point. So I think that he has helped the younger guys a lot. I'm excited to see Cam, assuming that he'll be back this weekend. But, I don't think that we could have asked for any more up till this point in the season.
Taylor, I want to shift sides of the football to the defense because I saw a lot of gripes and maybe shared concern from Auburn folks following that New Mexico game on the defensive side of the football. Some of the more notable Auburn personalities out there were questioning maybe some of the athleticism or just the defense as a whole. Do you share that same concern? Again, I was kind of surprised to hear that maybe the DJ Durkin's defense isn't quite what Auburn fans were expecting, at least to this point this year.
So I think some injuries have played a role in that, as they do for any team out there. But our secondary is something that's been of concern to me since week 1. It's, receivers are running wide open all game, it seems. And especially last weekend, it was, there'd be a receiver, and our secondary, the secondary was basically out of the camera shot. And I'm sitting there thinking, what in the world is going on? So, Keontae Scott is playing a different position, which he requested. That hasn't looked great by any means. I don't have stats in front of me, but the numbers are not good. But Cam Lee should be returning. I can't remember if it was a hamstring. I think that may have been what held him out. I think him coming back should help in the secondary, but a positive of the defense is I feel like the second half, there have been positive adjustments made, especially the Cal game, which the defense did their job. The defense came out in the second half. They made adjustments. They looked better. It was the offense. We didn't score. We couldn't score. We couldn't move the ball. So I think the silver lining, I try to find the silver lining to keep my sanity the majority of the time. But for this defense, I think it's that they have been able to make adjustments at halftime. I don't know if it's scheme adjustments or just execution, but they've been able to adjust at halftime and look better in the second half. So, hopefully we can get to a point to where it doesn't take 30 minutes of football for them to look like they're executing the game plan well. But they have been able to make adjustments when need be. And hopefully once a few of these guys are recovered and back on the field, they'll perform a little bit better.
Taylor, let's get to the thing everybody wants to talk about when it comes to Auburn, the quarterback position. You mentioned Hank Brown obviously takes over for Peyton Thorne. And Taylor, I'll admit I was not a Peyton Thorne guy coming into the season. A lot of the reasons that I didn't share the same optimism about Auburn was because I felt like the Tigers were just flat out deficient at the quarterback position. I know there was a lot of hope, obviously, he was going to take the next step, but to this point, we haven't seen it. But it feels like there is a new energy and a new optimism in Hank Brown. I know it's just one game against New Mexico, but 4 touchdowns and maybe more importantly, 0 interceptions. You mentioned gunslinger. I've heard that a lot. Just talk about what you saw from him in that New Mexico game and why there's a lot of optimism around him going in this game against Arkansas and beyond.
So Tom Luganbill earlier this week was on the next round, and he was asked about the Auburn quarterback transition. And one thing that he said that really stood out to me was, how many times does a guy have to show you who he is before you start to believe it in regard to Peyton Thorne? And I'm sitting there watching the show thinking, oh my God, he's right. Because he'd shown glimpses of hope, but he wasn't a guy. In all respect to Peyton, he's been on the show. He's a great guy, but he crumbled under pressure. When Auburn was down, or he needed to make a big play, he typically was not doing that. And Hank Brown, he's composed. He's so composed. He does not get rattled. And that's what stood out to me last game was he never looked like he was panicking. He looked like he was confident in his decisions. He was going through his progressions, and he never looked frazzled. He never looked like he was panicking, making rash decisions. And that's what you need. You need a confident quarterback that, doesn't start to freak out after a couple seconds in the pocket. And Peyton, I don't want to say something that's unkind about Peyton, but I just don't know if it's not the talent. But after 5 years of playing quarterback in either the Big Ten or the SEC, the issues that you're seeing over and over should be fixed. And if you're not able to make those corrections, then I don't know what to do. And I think that the change being made was the best thing for the program because, like you said, there's a new energy. There's almost a newfound hope, especially within the fan base. And I know that the coaches aren't scrolling Twitter making decisions based off of that. But if they rolled Peyton Thorne out with the ones week 3, he probably would have looked okay. Mm-hmm. But what does that prove? Because he's shown that he can beat, teams that aren't extremely talented. But then when a big game rolls along, he doesn't perform well. So I think Hank, he has, his ceiling is a lot higher, in my opinion. Obviously, we haven't seen much of him. His tape is from high school. But this is a Hugh Freeze guy. So Hugh recruited him to Liberty, and then when he got the Auburn job, he came over with him. So he obviously likes what he sees in Hank. And I just think that there's a lot of room to grow because he hasn't played a lot of college football. And looking as clean as he did, just decision-making wise, yes, you have to take opponent into consideration, but you can only build off that. He wasn't making silly errors that we've seen Peyton make over and over.
So, Taylor, just hypothetically, humor me, if you will. Again, a lot of optimism around Hank Brown. The bottom line is we don't know what we're going to get. That's what makes this game against Arkansas and really Auburn moving forward so fascinating. If he were to struggle ever so slightly, do you think the benching of Peyton Thorne is a move to where, we can kind of close the book on that and this is just going to be Hank Brown's team moving forward? Or could we actually see Auburn go back to Peyton Thorne, as crazy as that sounds sitting here right now? Because it definitely seems like, I think the fan base, to your point, right, wrong, or indifferent, they're kind of ready to move on and just try it with something else and someone different. But, I mean, do you think Hugh Freeze and the coaching staff look at it that way from what being around that program? Is the Peyton Thorne era behind us, or is this one of those things where it's just kind of a week to week? If Hank struggles, we could see Peyton Thorne back in there.
I think the Peyton Thorne era is over. I think this is Hank Brown's team. And something that stood out to me was, I can't remember exactly what the question was, but it was after the game last week during the press conference. Hugh Freeze flat out said, Hank's starting next week. He was closing the door to any speculation. And that's going to be a question moving forward because that's basically all that was asked the week prior. What are you going to do with the quarterback? What are you going to do with the quarterback? Will a change be made? Will a change be made? And so he just went ahead and closed that door and said, Hank's starting. This is Hank's offense. This is Hank's team. And at this point, I don't know if even if Hank starts to struggle, I don't know that you go back to Peyton. And which, I mean, that might be silly, but his confidence now is obviously depleted after what happened in the Cal game and then being benched. It seemed on the sideline, which I didn't see this, but a lot of people were talking about the fact that when Hank came off the field, there were a couple times where Peyton was the first one that went and talked to him, trying to, walk him through what Peyton was seeing. So it seems like his attitude is positive on the sideline, which that's all that you can ask for at that point, because he was a team captain. He was at media days. But I just don't see what the benefit would be in going back to him, because he's done after this year. He's out of eligibility. So you might as well start developing these younger guys and letting them get in-game reps, because whether he plays this year or not, Peyton's not going to be here next year. And Hank, Walker, Holden, they will be. So why not start developing them and getting them comfortable playing SEC football when one of them could potentially be the future of your program? That's a lot of my opinion. What will really happen if Hank struggles? I'm hoping that we don't have to find that out, honestly, because my mental health will decline at a rapid pace. But I don't think we see him again.
So, Taylor, zeroing in on this game on Saturday, Auburn and Arkansas, like you mentioned, what's so fascinating is that this is one over the course of the offseason because of Arkansas's struggles and the optimism around Auburn that I think most looked at and said, hey, this should be maybe not an easy win, but I think this is one that every Auburn fan looked at the schedule and checked it off as a W. Call it for what it is, a home game against the Hogs. Now, all of a sudden, Arkansas has shown some life on offense, and Taylon Green and Bobby Petrino, and probably should have had a win at Stillwater, probably should be undefeated. Auburn with some of their struggles, brand new quarterback. It's a 3-point spread now, and this feels much more of a coin flip than it once was. Taylor, shed some light on the importance of this game for Hugh Freeze. We know what it means for Arkansas, obviously, but I tend to come from the school of thinking that, the Arkansas tenure, the Sam Pittman tenure there, it kind of already is what it is, right? Like we kind of know what it is. Even if they were to win this game, it'd be a huge win, but Sam Pittman may not be there next year. I feel like this is a critical game for Hugh Freeze. And when you look at the schedule that's upcoming after this, but you're still kind of laying the foundation, building the program. You had a ton of offseason momentum with recruiting. And, I'm not saying, Taylor, you couldn't bounce back. But after losing the Cal game, if you were to drop this one at Jordan-Hare, this just feels like one desperately that Hugh Freeze and company need to find a way to win.
I cannot remember who said this, but I was listening to a show earlier this week, and someone referred to this game as the Hope Bowl. The hope of both of these, and it may have been someone that was on your show talking about.
I think I called it. This is the game with the most potential to be like the drunkest game of the weekend.
But
so that
as well. That as well. It was referred to the Hope Bowl somewhere, and I think that is a perfect representation of what this is, because this offseason, the idea was, can we start the season 5-0 with the biggest question mark being Oklahoma? Obviously, that is off the table now. No one was expecting Auburn to drop a game that early. And this weekend also is a massive recruiting weekend for Auburn. There will be a lot of big names on campus, and it's the SEC opener. I was not expecting them to drop a game that early, because, the narrative around Freeze as well is he always loses a game that he shouldn't. He might win a game that he shouldn't win, but he loses a game that he doesn't need to lose or isn't supposed to lose. And that loss does not help with the narrative at all. But there's a newfound energy, there's a newfound excitement around this team and this offense and hope. And so I think that there was a steep decline after that loss of, okay, this season's a wash, because fans overreact. I overreact. I'm one of them. But I think last week, the switch to Hank Brown re-energized the fan base and the team, I think. And you're kind of on an incline again. And things are looking like, okay, we lost that game, but we have a new quarterback now. So, the opportunities are endless. And the stretch of the games that follows the SEC opener is brutal. You don't play a home game in the month of October, and you need the momentum to be on, an upward slope. You need it to be on a climb heading into this, because we don't have a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Not easy wins, but like gimme games left this season. This isn't one either. But if you drop this game, the outlook on the rest of the season is you got to start winning games that you're not supposed to win at that point for this to be what some would consider a successful season, which I was hoping for 8 wins at least. Again, I'm unrealistic, but I just think for the energy, for the excitement, and Auburn has been in the headlines a lot for recruiting this offseason. So to be able to continue the momentum in a positive direction, this game is vital, especially with it being at home.
Yeah, Taylor, to your point, I don't think you're delusional or overly optimistic. Everybody I talk to, Auburn folks alike, whether it be non-Auburn folks or Auburn folks, 8 wins or more was kind of that target number. It felt like 8 at least was the magic number. When you look at the Arkansas Razorbacks, Taylor, just from what you've seen, and you look at the matchup, areas you think Auburn can take advantage of or win, areas of concern for you in this game. Again, this one looks like, I think most are expecting a high-scoring game, back and forth, pretty close. So when you look at Arkansas specifically, challenges you think they present, maybe some areas where Auburn can win some battles and win some matchups.
Some people have been comparing Taylen Green to the quarterback that Auburn saw last weekend, and Auburn has had a hard time containing quarterbacks. So I think the defense as a whole, we haven't had much pressure on quarterbacks. I don't think that we had 1 sack last weekend. I could be wrong on that. Again, I don't have the stats in front of me, but pressuring the quarterback, which Taylen Green didn't have the greatest game against UAB last week, but he has shown sparks of potential. He has the ability to be productive. And there are just so many question marks regarding Auburn's defense. And I think there are still, question marks around who's playing, who will be available, who won't be. So personnel wise, I don't really think anyone, which I'm sure the coaching staff is, but from a media aspect, I don't know if we're 100% certain on who we're going to see on the field or not. But the secondary, what I need to see is an improved secondary, because this game and moving forward, if you can't get pressure on the quarterback and your secondary is ineffective, then SEC play is going to be tough.
Taylor, when you look at this game, path to victory for the Tigers, I mean, is it as simple as just Hank Brown needs to play well? I'm sure there's more to it than that. But when you look at the game itself, if Auburn's going to come out on top, what specifically do you think they need to do?
I think Jarquez Hunter, Damari Austin, Jeremiah Cobb need to have big games. The second half of last week, our running backs started making a little bit of noise. And Jarquez Hunter is, one of the elite running backs in the SEC. So I think he and the others in that running back room having a productive game will take a little bit of pressure off of Hank Brown, the redshirt freshman, in his first SEC game. So if we have options offensively and we're not 100% dependent on Hank Brown completing passes, I think it takes the pressure off Hank, makes him a little bit more comfortable, and we just have options, which we have so many weapons offensively, but it's just the ability to use them productively as a whole, not just the receivers, not just the running backs, but if everyone can have a productive day, I'll feel pretty good about where we are.
Taylor Korn of the Next Round Live, host of Uncorked, and also a contributor for the Barn and Auburn entity. Does a great job talking all things Auburn Tigers. Taylor, let folks know, just in case they don't, where they can find you on social media and check out all your great work.
You can find me at Twitter at Taylor Korn TNR for the Next Round. And then I'm posting a lot on our Next Round social media account. So you can find us there on all social media platforms at Next Round Live. And then you can also follow the Barn Auburn on Twitter for all things Auburn.
Taylor, appreciate you taking the time. Looking forward to the weekend on the Plains. We'll see you soon.